So this is the Chronic Disease Support Program, Part 2 on Your Eyes Predict Chronic Disease. And I want to do a little rehashing into what we talked about last week. And very simply, almost everything's a vascular problem. Okay? Essentially every eye problem that's really has a pathology tied to it is a vascular problem. So what we said is, here's the gentleman from the doctor from UC San Francisco. You know, the eye, particularly the retina, is the only place where you can see a bare nerve, artery, and vein without doing any cutting. And the processes going on there are probably going on in the rest of the body. The caveat to that is focal disease, you know, where your eye can be infected, or affected, infected, whatever, and everything else is fine. And we know people like that, don't we, Dr. Carter?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then we played this video, is Alzheimer's a vascular disease, and connected it to the eye. And, you know, this has everything to do with the eye, atherosclerosis or vascular disease, because the carotid is the most vascularly dense tissue in your entire body, and that lies underneath your retina, your retinal ganglion cell, the photographic plate of your body where you're converting a photon of light into an electrical signal. So this is what you see up on every single doctor's office, primary care, cardiologist, whatever, where they claim that, you know, there's a buildup of gunk largely from the inside, and they usually have a little arrow pointing at cholesterol or something of that nature. But really, Dr. McCulley at Harvard and Dr. Tremp, but it was Louise, I came to see Dr. Tremp one day, and he was highlighting this paper furiously in 4 different colors, and it was written by McCulley. And this was 2009. It introduced me to the term vasa vasorum. And this is an area, see, every cell needs to be within 3 cell diameters of a capillary. Otherwise, it will not live. It doesn't have enough blood supply, oxygen, detoxification, all that stuff. So in a large vessel is a complex structure. You know, look at the carotid artery is almost the size of my thumb. So you've got quite a lot of tissue surrounding where the inside of that large vessel. And this area here is where you have lots of little teeny vessels supporting the big vessel. And this is pretty much where the disease starts in every case. Okay, and the carotid has a huge network of these capillary vessels. The brain, as Dr. Harshfield referred to last week, and the imagery from that video that I produced shows this diffuse network. These are the same vessels that are supporting the large vessels. So the same capillaries in the brain are the same capillaries that support the large vessels of the heart. Okay? Why do I say this? The diseases are all connected. It's the same vessel that we're looking at. Why can you have a heart attack or a stroke? Because the disease starts on the outside and then slowly spreads to the inside. And I talked about the analogy to a pimple, but we won't go down there. Now, I'll be a little scattered today talking about different topics related to eye, but, you know, we're one of the few groups in the world that uses the eye to test for Alzheimer's risk. But there are 2,000 publications on the topic. And I'll talk about this later. But the Mass General team, Harvard, Rudy Tanzi, and some of those fancy docs and researchers at Harvard showed a certain type of cataract was tied to Alzheimer's. In 2003, they published that paper. 18 years ago. They had the data 20 years ago. And they've been working feverishly ever since to produce an instrument that they could monetize and sell to every hospital for screening. But you don't need that. The slit lamp microscope, a basic instrument to measure cataract. They could have screened 1 million people by now. And I think they've screened a couple hundred just in the development of this instrument, which once again is completely unnecessary. Dr. Tremp would be looking at cortical cataracts, the Alzheimer's cataract, anytime a patient came into his office. It's that simple. So research shows that diseases and conditions of the brain can also affect the eyes because the optic nerve and retina are actually brain tissue. That's why I have it out there. But I mean, the eye is much better in systemic causes of Alzheimer's because the eye is ocularly immune privileged. That means it expresses inflammatory conditions more readily than the brain. That's why glaucoma, if someone's on a systemic neurodegenerative track, there's a very good chance they'll get glaucoma first before they progress into Alzheimer's. So can an eye exam? Here's Harvard Health, 2019. Why are they publishing this in 2019 when their group of experts they literally traveled the morning show circuit for a couple weeks, explaining what they found, that they could actually screen for Alzheimer's in 2003. So here we are. If it was good in 2003, it must be good in 2019. The death of brain cells in Alzheimer's and the death of vision cells in glaucoma is essentially the same process. They're highly linked. Retinal scans are currently able to see Alzheimer's plaques in patients. Yeah. Long before other forms of imaging identify them in the brain. And so this is Harvard Health summary from 2019. And that's what we talked about last time. You can get an MRI, but it doesn't see down to the capillary. So unless you're starting to have significant atrophy, MRI it's definitely not an early detection device. It's confirmation of an existing disease, at least mild cognitive impairment. So it really doesn't give warnings, the MRI, whereas the OCT does. The OCT definitely does. Will anybody with an aberrant OCT progress into Alzheimer's? Maybe not. Okay, that's why we dig down into other risk factors, lifestyle, current labs, robust cognitive testing, things of that nature. But kids with depression, with Lyme disease, will have a retina that shows up on the OCT test that shows atrophy. Now the difference is you treat them properly and that you can either slow, stop, or reverse that process. Whereas in older people, it's going to be much more challenging, obviously. So here's kind of the time frame. Plaques visible in the eye here, prevalence of Alzheimer's, usually determined by autopsies and looking at the so-called hallmark plaque, the amyloid plaque. So there can be up to a 15-year early warning signal from retinal evaluation. And retinal evaluations, the OCT is an expensive tool, but it's a pittance compared to MRI. And I've had a couple MRIs. I don't really care for them. They're not very fun. Whereas OCT, yeah, the little intense light, but really just a little irritation from that. But it's really non-invasive. So we're talking about the amyloid plaques in the brain. We're talking about the retina. We're talking about looking at the nervous tissue layer and its thickness. But the underlying pathology is really, deterioration of the nerves. But what comes first is your body. Your body is never going to let you down. It may fail or lose the battle, but it's always going to put its best effort forth. Okay? And now, if you've been listening to the Alzheimer's discussions and the Alzheimer's Association for 20 years now, you'll think that amyloid is a bad thing. Plaques are a bad thing, but they're actually a sign of your immune system fighting. Yes, you want to find out why your body's forming plaques, but they're actually a good early warning sign, not a treatment target like it's still going on. I think, Steve, didn't you tell me When the latest, in the last few months, when the latest Alzheimer's drug was approved, that many people on the review board resigned and all that good stuff. And what they were doing, the treatment was going after reversing the formation of the amyloid plaques. Now, yeah, they occur in the vessels, but these amyloid plaques are part of the innate immune response to subacute infection, which is most likely the major cause, in my opinion, the major cause of vascular disease. So we can see these very well, and generally you have to, if you're doing a scan in the brain, you got to use, now they have more advanced techniques, but forever you had to use a gadolinium dye that's toxic, and MRI and all that stuff. And here, Cedars-Sinai, they're doing imaging for the plaques, but you don't even have to do that. We don't do anything this fancy. Plaque is staring you right in the face if you know what you're doing. So here's some of you probably have already seen this because I've done this talk. I like to do this talk a couple times a year because it's just novel. No one's talking about this. But here's a 5-year-old with a nuclear cataract. Okay, nuclear cataract. What is a nuclear cataract? Well, it's the exact same thing that these guys at Cedars-Sinai are trying to find in the vessels. It's an amyloid formation. Some people call it a misfolded protein. I think that's a bad term. Unfolded protein, that's really a bad term, but that's what you'll hear for these plaques. But really, it's what Dr. Tansey at Harvard calls an antimicrobial, so against microbes, peptide. So it's a protein, not necessarily misfolded. It's in the right conformation because your brain is telling your liver to make it, your immune system, wherever it's being made. So it is properly conformed. And it's very important because it is part of the immune system fighting infection in the tissue. Now, here's a 5-year-old with cataract. That happened acutely. Highly virulent infection, virus, Ebola. Now, people who develop cataract later in life, that is not an acute process. That's more of a chronic phase. And it's telling us that you probably have chronic inflammation and chronic infection. Very simple screening tool. Okay. But of course, if you read this, cataracts usually afflict the old, but doctors in Africa have been shocked to find them in Ebola survivors as young as 5. Shocked to find them. What that simply means is they don't understand what an amyloid protein is, what a plaque protein is. They don't even understand what it is. If they did, this would be rewritten. Cataracts usually afflict the old, but doctors in Africa have been pleased to find them in Ebola survivors as young as 5 because it obviously saved that patient's life by fighting the infection. That's what the headline should really be saying, right? It's like it's 180 degrees from what we're being told. I know it's kind of a niche space, the eye, and there's not a lot, it's a tight silo. But when you look at neurodegeneration, there are far more glaucoma sufferers than there are Alzheimer's sufferers, or all the neurodegeneration, dementia type sufferers. Glaucoma is far and away more prevalent. So patients with more dental work are also more likely to have glaucoma. We keep harping on the eye-tooth connection because there's so many good docs out there that are ignoring a very obvious low-hanging area to look for disease. Unexpected relationship between developing glaucoma and the bacteria in a person's mouth or the number of natural teeth they have has been found in a U.S. study, 2017. Another crazy thing, unexpected relationship. Scientific American in 2002 published an 88-page separate publication, beautifully done, called Oral and Whole Body Health, where they talked about vascular disease being caused by periodontal disease. So if you look at the eye as neurological tissue only, the retina, then you're missing the boat. That's why I keep harping. Everything, in quotes, from a bell curve perspective, is vascular. So what does periodontal disease affect? The vasculature. What is the highest, most dense vasculature in the entire body? Right under the retina. Therefore, couldn't something like periodontal disease affect the retina? Absolutely. So, unexpected relationship. That's an interesting statement. But, when I say Scientific American published this in 2002, I mean, there are papers going back eons on the oral, particularly glaucoma, but it doesn't have to be glaucoma. It can be macular disease, it can be cataract. Dr. Tremp, my mentor, was making that association in the 1980s. So the role of microbes in development of Alzheimer's disease, that's what we were talking about earlier, Steve, before we started, is that, there's a microbiome everywhere, and we're really deficient in it. Listerine. I'm not sure if fluoride is toxic to the microbiome in the mouth, but fluoride is a very toxic substance. The dose makes the poison. Why can it penetrate enamel? Because it's extremely aggressive, chemically. So these are the things we have to be concerned about. But what we're talking about here is more about the oral. So you have oral spirochetes. And my friend and partner really mentor out of Switzerland, talked about spirochetes and Alzheimer's in 1993. So that connection goes way back, and I don't see her being acknowledged in this paper, but she's really the leader in this space. So taking care of the oral is really important. Cortexime is a company that is now public, that is developing treatments for P. gingivalis to treat Alzheimer's disease. Then the next step would be to treat P. gingivalis for glaucoma. Dr. Carr, any investors out there, this is wide open territory, and we're
absolutely
we're at the top of our game in the world in terms of that concept and how to treat it. A lot of people think mercury is a major cause for Alzheimer's, and I think it's a consideration. But okay, so here is, I think this is talking about the cortexime work. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it is. But the point is, periodontal disease and dentuism, with just tooth loss, is a much higher risk factor than mercury. Now look, mercury's there. It's obvious. It's toxic. And if you can afford to, you want to get rid of it. No question about it. Okay? But in the hierarchy of health, I'd much rather understand my own oral infectious burden than my mercury levels. This is what Dr. Hack was talking with me about the other day, the gentleman that's involved with the neurologics program with us, is the beautiful thing about the eye and using it to test brain health is because the visual pathway between the light hitting the retina, being converted to an electron, and going all the way back to the visual cortex, you're going across the entire cross-section of the brain. So if there's any problems with the brain along the way, it can lead to ocular dysfunction. And what Dr. Trump used to tell me very frequently, but I enjoyed it, is that the beautiful thing about being an eye doctor rather than a neurologist is you have two eyes. You only have one brain. And what that means is, there's a couple key things here. So ocular, visual acuity tied to binocularism. If your eyes aren't focusing well the same way or reacting the same way to the electrical signal, things are going to get messed up. So you can see that they traverse through slightly different pathways. Probably, and that's very important. So-called circadic rhythms and things of that nature, and just visual acuity, left to right eye alone, can be very telling, particularly in things like autism in younger kids. But the other thing about having two eyes, one brain, is that an eye disease doesn't spontaneously erupt at the same time in both eyes. This is what made Dr. Trump's work a cut above everybody else, because there were very good statistics on if one eye is infected, how quickly it will traverse into the so-called fellow eye. Okay, and in macular degeneration, that number happens to be 22% in 1 year and 85% in 5 years. So if you're just going standard of care and macular disease shows up in your right eye, there's a 22% chance it's going to start in the left eye in 1 year, 85% chance in 5 years. Dr. Trump's patients hardly ever progressed. That means he was really treating the disease systemically and preventing its migration from the affected eye to the so-called fellow eye. So that's another beauty of eye testing, and we're putting together a new program. You know, if you go to your eye doctor per our prescription at the beginning of part 1, get an OCT, get a slit lamp microscope, get a fundus camera, get a complete eye exam, get the digital images. But we're going to be adding a few more tests for kids, young adults, and even older adults that have more severe neurological conditions. And I think we're actually going to start making a list of providers that I think can do some of these tests. So we're going to look beyond our standard. But from a screening perspective, particularly for neurodegeneration and vascular health, the tests we do are completely adequate, and matter of fact, are absolutely top tier for screening. So, but the eye is so robust. I mean, you know, when you interact with nature, when you interact with the outside environment, the very first thing before your muscles can twitch is you have to convert that photon to an electron. And there are instruments that measure the eye that can tell you and map out how fast you do that. So we intuitively think, okay, light hits my eye, image created, boom, it's instantaneous. Well, nothing's instantaneous. The speed of light is 300,000 meters per second. It's not a gazillion meters per second. Even it has a limitation on how fast it moves, light, okay? So everybody has a different rate, and it's going to be very, very fast, obviously, in milliseconds, how quickly you can convert that photon to an electron. That's an advanced instrument, but I would argue that, and they're not doing it, pilots, athletes, gymnasts, things like that have to have, hockey players have to have instantaneous reaction time. You want that measurement. You know, I was kidding one of my colleagues. I said, help me get into the combines with this testing, because before some rich guy's about to sign another $100 million contract for a 29-year-old athlete, you might want to be charting out how quickly that individual is converting a photon to an electron and creating an image since he was 22. Is it stable or is it declining? And if they're not taking care of themselves, I can guarantee you that that test will be more accurate than any other test on the planet to determine what their potential athletic performance will be in the future. Because reaction time at the high end is critical. Anyway, I said at the beginning, Michael, I might go on a little straight path, right? And I did it.
Right.
But I mean, it's called multifocal ERG, electroretinogram. And you can actually measure how fast your eye is converting that photon to an electron in a brilliant three-dimensional mapping. So this is the most basic tool every optometrist has, a slit lamp microscope. And sometimes it doesn't even come with a camera to create an image. The eye doctor just looks in, scans your lens for anything, pigmentation, but particularly they're looking for opaque structures, opacities they call it. And the most common opacity is a cataract. Okay, and of course the cataract has a particular size and shape, so they can tell very much how, that you have a cataract. And the American Optometric Association has a grading system. So your doc will take the sheet we give, and if they don't give you an image for slit lamp, that's okay. Some of them don't have cameras, but they can grade your left and right eye cataract level. And there are 3 types of cataracts we want to get, and we'll talk about those. But all they're doing with a slit lamp is just this. The curtain has a little, the curtains are separated a little bit. Light flows into the room and you can see all the dust particles. It's the exact same thing, you can see the little opacities, and that's all it is to a slit lamp microscope. But I guess I'm talking about Alzheimer's now. We'll talk about vascular disease in a minute related to the slit lamp microscope. But so here's a study from 2003, the eye-brain connection, that supranuclear, the real optometric or ophthalmic term for it is cortical, because the outside of the lens, the outside of the eye, it's called the cortex. So it's a cortical cataract, whereas the most common one is in the middle of the lens, right, in central vision, like that African girl, 5 years old. You could see the white cataract, white opaque structure of the cataract in the center of her eye. That's a nuclear cataract, or the nucleus, or the center of the lens. Simple. But what Tanzi and company, the chaired professor of Harvard neurology, that the supranuclear cataract is found in lenses of people with Alzheimer's disease. 2003. So, very simple thing. We're looking for the opacities. Now, here's the only issue you could confront. Most eye doctors, and I'm talking 99%, whether they say they look for cortical cataract or not, is a lie. They don't. They just look for nuclear cataract. That's the only thing that affects your central vision. The supranuclear or cortical cataract do not affect your vision, so the eye docs kind of ignore it. Okay? And to look at the cortex, the outside of the lens rather than the center, they have to dilate your pupil a little bit more. They have to up the intensity of the light. They have to direct the laser at a little more high intensity, so it's a little more irritating to the patient. But pretty much everybody that I send to the eye doctor that takes a report goes to an eye doctor. They do report whether it's the cortical cataract and grade. I hope they're testing for it. It's a little harder to do. My son just graduated from optometry school. He understands it. But generally in his population, he's not screening for cortical cataract, just nuclear. So here's what I just explained verbally. So there's a nuclear cataract, just like in the girl with the Ebola. And so you can see it, the light's coming in, that's going to affect central vision. Whereas the cortical cataract is way out here on the edge. So most of the light being focused on the retina is coming into the center. So your central vision, your primary vision. And so here's some more cortical cataract structures. And then you have this whole line of stem cells around the lens. So that's what I want them to look for. I want them to look for a nuclear cataract. You'll find out that this is a very important structure in terms of predicting your future health. But in brain health, brain is the hardest thing to protect long term or reverse if you have a pathology. So looking for these supranuclear or cortical cataracts is very important, and earlier the better. So here's from Tanzi's work and Goldstein, 79-year-old woman. There's the supranuclear or cortical cataract. You can see it's a little hard to see. And there's the nuclear cataract right in the middle. This woman had even more advanced Alzheimer's, even though she was only 68, a lot more cortical cataract. Okay. These are fancy images, but the eye doctor can minimally see these with a basic slit lamp microscope. Cost $6,000. Not to get the test. That's how much the instrument used to cost. Very inexpensive. Now here's the power of the eye. This is the brain of an Alzheimer's patient on autopsy. And the brain is this big massive jelly, if you will. And to find that, to stain that protein and find that plaque in the brain takes a technician that really knows how to do pathology very, very well. Not easy. Okay. This is the exact same misfolded protein in the lens of a living patient out of Dr. Tremp's clinic. And you can see, shockingly, how similar they are in conformation. But what the Harvard study showed, I'll go back to this paper here. What the Harvard study showed, okay, is that these two misfolded, once again, a misnomer. These two amyloid antimicrobial peptides, they didn't know it at the time when they published this paper in 2003, compositionally are exactly the same. It's like saying water, water. Okay, exactly the same. Now the interesting thing is you probably won't get this kind of testing done at an optometrist's office or even an ophthalmologist. It's more of research. But we're looking at the formation. A cortical cataract just doesn't pop out of the blue. Steve, like we were talking about earlier, it's all adaptation, or it's slow, like chronic disease, slow migration into that disease state. So this is a lens in the eye, and there's the test called coma aberration. GDX machine. I'm just trying to test my memory. It's been a while, but anyway, when the lens starts swelling the little teeniest bit, most likely due to this antimicrobial peptide formation, because your lens will usually not swell, okay? It's very stable. Yes, it may change conformation slowly as you age, no question about that, but in terms of short-term swelling, it just doesn't do that. So this is like looking at a little drop of oil on water. You can see the slightest change in the thickness of the lens. The next thing we see is what's called pseudoexfoliation. Most eye doctors will say, I don't know what I'm talking about. And I would agree with them 1/x, whatever that means. But pseudoexfoliation is like the Milky Way. You see this diffuse network of little stars way up in the sky. This is a little diffuse network of antimicrobial peptide forming. Then you'll see a fibril, then you'll see spokes, and then you'll see a full-blown cortical cataract. Most people are in a wheelchair and a feeding tube when they get to a cortical cataract of this level. But it just shows you the profundity of the eye testing and how precise it can be in measuring if we really want that kind of precision. Hardly ever used, research tool, not a lot published on it. But the good news is a good eye doctor can see very early cataract, and they can see very early cortical cataract. Now the question is, it's more on your shoulders. What are you going to do about it? And of course, what you want to do is blood testing, life risk assessments, all that good stuff, see if we can reverse that process. So I think with that, I want another measly 18 slides, and we'll get into the OCT next time. So with that, I don't even have to stop share. We'll just go back to our original slide, and let's see. I feel like I've been interrogated with this bright light here, so pardon me as I put it to the background. Yeah, we'll stop share because I can see questions. We don't have a lot of questions this week. Please mute everybody. Oh well. Family told by dentist to use Listerine, and I need to convince them that it is bad for them. It depends. Do you like your family?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, alcohol and things like that are generally broad spectrum killing bacteria, and they even advertise it. 99.9% of all germs. Well, notice they just say germs. They don't say anything about your good organisms.
Right.
Okay, they completely left that out. I even worry about using too much iodine and things like that. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. You want your microbiome to flourish, but you also want to keep the biofilms and pathogens down. Any thoughts, Dr. Carter?
Well, I mean, but that's why we do the oral DNA test, because that gives you a really good, view at the balance of the good and bad bacteria, because it also gives you the bacteria that are beneficial.
Yep. So, but that's why I don't think you should peroxide every night. I don't think you need to do that to keep the pathogens down unless you've got a bad oral DNA test and you want to knock it down. But I'll just do a little salt water and the water pick and my soap. And so once or twice a week I'll add a little iodine in. I don't want to go berserk because we now know there's a microbiome in the brain, there's a microbiome in the mouth, there's a microbiome everywhere. There's beneficial organs everywhere. So think about what you're doing. We oftentimes get overly zealous in treatment of ourselves, I think. So just be careful. Which nutrients are essential for capillary cell wall strength? That is definitely a Dr. Carter question.
Well, I mean, I really like arterycil. Because it actually helps to heal the glycocalyx, which is the inner lining of the vessels, and that's really, extremely important in terms of, the integrity of things. Looking at, endothelial dysfunction and nitric oxide, using things like citrulline and L-arginine, beetroot powder. Those are also, very beneficial to enhance the integrity of the endothelial lining and decrease inflammation. Vitamin C, also, very integral in terms of the tensile strength of the, all tissues, but also for the endothelium and so forth. And then there are a whole host of other nutrients, which is, why, it's also nice to do a micronutrient test to kind of see where you are on that continuum as well.
Yeah, and my only comment I'd add to it is that I'm gonna publish a few papers this year. I have 3 in the queue, and I'm gonna write another one on free cholesterol. Nobody knows they're free cholesterol. We talked about that last time too, and I'll spend a lot of time on that. But cholesterol is essential to the form and structure and activity of every cell in your body. So your liver produces free cholesterol. Your brain produces free cholesterol because it has to in case your liver's not working well. But you want to eat foods high in cholesterol too. Free cholesterol. You know, shrimp, fatty fish. You know, plants aren't going to get you too much cholesterol. You can synthesize some, but free cholesterol cannot be under emphasized in its importance in cell membrane integrity. Louise, you must not have spent as much time with Dr. Tremp as I did. Can you actually reverse cataract process rather than just slow it down? Now the answer is the lens is the largest avascular tissue in your entire body. In fact, it's one giant cell. So it kind of like the concept of a capillary being within 3 cell diameters of any living cell. The lens is just an oddball. So there's not a lot of flow in and out of the lens, yet you form a cataract. And that Ebola girl obviously formed it very quickly. James Seeberger, a friend of mine, MD, PhD, and Dr. Tremp have both seen cataract reversal through treatment. But Dr. Carter, you said that N-acetyl-carnitine has some evidence of
L-carnosine. So CAN-C. So CAN-C was developed. I believe it was developed in Russia. And Life Extension has a version of it, and that's on our website as well. But the CAN-C, which is an L-carnosine eye drop, is effective. It just takes a long time, over a year of using the eye drops, but it is shown to be beneficial.
So Judy, I'm just gonna put in the site to com/I, and that should get you to the I form. You just click on the image and you get a PDF which you can download to take to the eye doctor. Let's see. So could not find the OCT form on the Health Revival website. It's just the I form. Let's see, Jeffrey, did you say that if we took pictures with our phone of the OCT scan, you're able to analyze the scan and advise? I mean, normally HIPAA, privacy, office to office, they want a fax. It's hopeless to fax an OCT. I've gotten dozens of them, and I really can't tell you anything. So, first choice is authorize them to email them. Second choice is have them print them out on a high quality printer and then either scan or send them to me otherwise. And I think an equally good choice is take a picture with your phone now, because there's such high resolution. Should be adequate to see most things. The only thing I may not see, which I really don't know how to interpret anyway, is the OCTA with angiography, looking at those microvessels. I just don't have experience looking at that, but I would send those to my son to get his opinion on that. But just the OCT alone, the slit lamp, the fundus camera, most of those have digital images. Just take pictures of them. So if you can. I've had people turned away. So not from the consult, but from refuse to give them their report other than through fax. It's your money, and it's your eye. And it's crazy. What address to email to? Just info@healthrevivalpartners.com. So speaking of oral microbiome balance, any opinion on how bad having false teeth is? This community, I would imagine, knows how backwards conventional dentistry is. LOL.
Right. Still get an oral DNA. That'll
Absolutely.
give you a good assessment of where you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
That seems like a gold standard, hey, for kind of testing out what's going on in that good old oral cavity.
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
anybody
Mhm.
50 plus should definitely get that test.
Yeah, and along with cone beam CT scan, that really gives you a great overall view of what's going on.
Okay.
Alrighty, well, next week is part 3, which is giving me more time to prepare for the body electric. So we could probably have 4 parts, but we'll try to do body electric some before we finish the eye stuff. Alrighty, y'all.
Okay.
Amazing.
All
Thanks
right.
again. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yep. Take care. Bye now.
Thanks, Don.